A single bullet shatters the winter stillness, ripping through glass and splintering peace like brittle ice. There's something cruel about how silence breaks not with warning, not gently, but suddenly and violently, thrusting ordinary people into extraordinary nightmares. It wasn't the kind of storm anyone saw coming. No darkening clouds or whispered warnings, just cold steel and colder hearts. A desperate journey forged by secrets hidden in shadows and truths buried beneath snowdrifts stained red. They say some roads lead to salvation, others straight to hell. Today, those roads became one. Survival is no longer a question, but a prayer whispered against the deafening roar of betrayal and bullets. The past, like winter, has a way of returning when you least expect it, forcing reckoning from those who thought they'd escaped its grip. Because in a world twisted by lies, the only thing more dangerous than the truth is someone willing to tell it. A single bullet shattered the winter stillness, ripping through the glass doors of Seattle's Harbor View restaurant and splintering the peace like brittle ice. Patrons screamed, diving under tables and behind pillars. Elena Blackwood had known the evening would end poorly, but not quite like this. Crouched behind an overturned table, Elena pressed her hand against her purse, feeling the outline of the encrypted drive nestled within. The intel on that device represented 3 years of deep cover work, names and locations of Russian assets embedded in American institutions, a network so extensive it threatened the very foundation of national security. "Move! And you're dead!" a voice snarled in accented English from behind her. Elena didn't bother turning around. Instead, she grabbed a steak knife from the floor, gripped it firmly, and in one fluid motion, drove it through the man's hand as he reached for her. His howl of pain provided the distraction she needed. She sprang to her feet, her elegant black dress now torn at the hem, the pearls at her neck gleaming under the chandelier light as she moved. Two more men in dark suits converged on her. The first received a champagne bottle to the face, crystal and expensive bubbly exploding on impact. The second caught her heel in his sternum, the air leaving his lungs in a pained gasp. "Traitor," he wheezed in Russian. "Not yours to judge," she replied in the same language, knocking him unconscious with a decisive blow to the temple. Elena scanned the chaos of the restaurant. Her CIA handler, Douglas, lay slumped against the bar, a crimson stain spreading across his white shirt. Their meeting had been compromised. Someone had talked. Sirens wailed in the distance. She had minutes, perhaps seconds before more of Viktor Petrov's Blackstone operatives arrived. The man was ruthless ex-FSB who had found more profitable employment selling secrets to the highest bidder, and now he wanted what she carried. Elena slipped out the service entrance, the cold December air biting at her exposed skin. Her government-issue Audi waited in the alley, engine still warm. As she slid behind the wheel, pain lanced through her shoulder. Looking down, she discovered the dark stains seeping through her coat. One of them had managed to wing her after all. "Damn it," she muttered, tearing a strip from her silk scarf to create a makeshift bandage. No time for proper first aid, not when Victor's men would be closing in. The car roared to life, tires squealing as she pulled onto the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. Her breathing came in controlled bursts, managing the pain as she'd been trained. A quick glance in the rearview mirror confirmed her fears. Two black SUVs had fallen into pursuit. The chase wound through downtown, a deadly dance of squealing tires and blaring horns. Elena weaved through traffic with precision, pushing the Audi to its limits. When one SUV pulled alongside, a gunman leaning out the window, she made a split-second decision, slamming her brakes. The SUV shot forward, colliding with a delivery truck at the intersection. "One down," she whispered, but the second vehicle remained stubbornly on her tail, gaining as her car's performance faltered. The bullet wound was beginning to affect her concentration, dark spots dancing at the edges of her vision. The weather worsened, snow beginning to fall, thick flakes obscuring the windshield. She needed to disappear, and fast. The navigation system indicated she was heading east, toward the Cascade Mountains. Good. The remote terrain offered both danger and opportunity. As the city lights faded behind her, the snowfall intensified, becoming a blizzard that engulfed the winding mountain roads. 2 hours later, with the second SUV no longer visible and her gas gauge hovering near empty, Elena knew she needed shelter. The Audi's engine sputtered, protesting the cold and the bullet hole through the radiator she'd only just noticed. The car limped forward another mile before giving up entirely, coasting to a stop on the shoulder of a remote highway. Blood loss and the biting cold made every movement an effort. Elena grabbed her purse and the emergency kit from the trunk, struggling to orient herself in the swirling white void. Through the curtain of snowflakes, a faint glow caught her attention, a light perhaps a quarter-mile ahead. Hope flared in her chest, dragging herself through knee-deep snow. She followed that distant beacon. Minutes felt like hours as the wind howled around her, needle-like ice crystals stinging her face. Finally, the shadowy outline of a building materialized, a garage of some sort, with a small attached living space. The worn sign, barely visible under its coating of snow, read Donovan's Auto Repair. Elena reached the door, her strength nearly spent. She knocked, the sound barely audible over the storm's fury. No response. Desperation mounting. She pounded harder, leaving smears of blood on the weather-beaten wood. Just as darkness threatened to claim her, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with silver hair and a face lined by years of hard work and harder memories. His weathered hand held a shotgun, but it wasn't aimed directly at her, more a precaution than a threat. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, taking in her appearance. "You're bleeding." "Please," Elena managed, her training allowing her to hide her true identity, even in extremis. "My car. The storm." The old man hesitated only a moment before lowering his weapon. "Come on, then," he said gruffly, "before you freeze to death on my doorstep." Inside, warmth enveloped her like a blessing. The garage was cluttered but clean, tools organized with military precision on pegboards. A pot-bellied stove radiated heat from the corner, near a threadbare armchair and a small kitchenette. This was clearly both workplace and home to the old mechanic. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to the chair. "I'll get the first aid kit." Elena sank gratefully into the worn cushions, her body finally betraying her as the adrenaline ebbed. The man returned with a metal box that looked older than she was, but when he opened it, she noted with relief that the supplies inside were modern and sterile. "I'm Ray," he said, kneeling beside her to examine the wound. "Ray Donovan." "Elena," she replied, giving her real first name, but not her surname. Old habits. "Thank you for letting me in." "Don't thank me yet. That's a bullet wound, not a cut." His eyes, sharp and intelligent despite his apparent age, fixed on hers. "Want to tell me why you're shot and stranded in a blizzard?" Elena had prepared a cover story during her trek through the snow. "Carjacking gone wrong. Back in the city. I managed to drive away, but..." Ray's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes suggested skepticism. Still, he nodded. "Need to clean this. Will hurt." His hands were surprisingly gentle for their size, deftly cleaning and dressing the wound. Elena bit her lip to keep from crying out as he extracted small fragments of metal. "Not too deep," he muttered. "Bullet passed through clean. Lucky." When he finished, he moved to a small stove and put on a kettle. "Coffee." Elena nodded gratefully. "Please." As Ray busied himself with the coffee, Elena took stock of her surroundings. The garage was well insulated against the cold, though drafts still whispered through in places. Various mechanical projects in different states of completion filled the workspace. But what caught her attention were the small details: technical manuals for aerospace systems, a faded photograph of a younger Ray in what appeared to be a NASA uniform, and tucked away in a corner, an award plaque so dusty she couldn't read the inscription. "You were with NASA?" she asked when he handed her a chipped mug of black coffee. Ray stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Long time ago. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." He shrugged, the gesture carrying the weight of old wounds. "Ancient history now. They sat in silence for a while, the howling wind outside filling the void between them. Elena sipped her coffee, strong and bitter, feeling strength slowly return to her limbs. Her shoulder throbbed, but the bleeding had stopped. "Storm's getting worse," Ray commented, glancing at a small weather radio on his workbench. "Roads will be closed by morning, if they aren't already." Elena nodded, mind racing. Victor wouldn't stop hunting her because of a little snow. She needed to reach Denver to deliver the intel to her CIA contact there. Every hour delayed put more agents at risk. "I can try to look at your car when the storm breaks," Ray offered, "though from what you described, doesn't sound promising." Before Elena could respond, headlights swept across the front windows, illuminating the garage in harsh white light. Both of them tensed. No one should be out in this weather, not unless they were specifically looking for something or someone. Ray moved with surprising agility for his age, dousing the main lights and motioning for Elena to stay quiet. He picked up his shotgun, checking that it was loaded. "Friends of yours," he whispered. Elena shook her head, adrenaline flooding her system once more. "Definitely not." Ray peered through a crack in the blinds. Black SUV, 3 men, armed. Elena's heart sank. They'd followed her blood trail in the snow. Or perhaps her car had a tracker she'd missed. Either way, Victor's men had found her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've brought trouble to your door." Ray's weathered face hardened with resolve. "Wouldn't be the first time." He handed her a revolver from a drawer. "Know how to use this?" Elena checked the weapon with practiced ease. "Yes." Something flickered in Ray's eyes, recognition. Perhaps that she was more than she appeared. But there was no time to dwell on it. A sharp knock rattled the door. "Mr. Donovan," a voice called, smooth and cultured with the barest hint of an accent. "FBI, we need to speak with you." Ray and Elena exchanged glances. She shook her head slightly. "It's late," Ray called back. "And there's a blizzard. Come back tomorrow." "I'm afraid this can't wait," the voice insisted. "We're looking for a fugitive. Dangerous woman. May have come this way." Ray positioned himself by the door, shotgun ready but not visible. "Show me some ID." There was a pause, then a badge pressed against the window. Even from her position, Elena could tell it was a fake good, but not perfect. "Look, sir," the voice continued, an edge of impatience creeping in. "We have reason to believe this woman is a Russian spy. National security is at stake. If you're harboring her, that's treason." Ray's jaw tightened. He glanced back at Elena, doubt flickering across his features. She held his gaze steadily, silently pleading for trust. "I haven't seen anyone," Ray responded firmly. "But you're welcome to check the outbuildings. I'll stay right here where it's warm." The man outside seemed to consider this. "Very well. We'll look around. But we'll need to speak with you after." Footsteps crunched away in the snow. Ray turned to Elena, his expression grim. "They're not FBI," he stated flatly. "No," Elena admitted. "They're not. Then who are they? And more importantly, who are you?" Elena weighed her options. Ray had taken her in, treated her wound, and now stood between her and Victor's men. He deserved some truth. "Those men work for a private intelligence firm called Blackstone," she explained quietly. "They're mercenaries, essentially, guns for hire. And they want you because—" Elena hesitated, then reached into her purse, extracting her CIA identification. Ray's eyes widened as he examined it. "Your intelligence," he breathed, not entirely surprised. "Yes, and what I'm carrying is vital to national security. Those men outside, they'll kill us both to get it." Ray processed this information, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to a workbench and pulled back a false panel, revealing a small cache of weapons. "Sounds like we've got a problem then," he said, checking a hunting rifle before handing it to her. "Because I don't much like uninvited guests, especially ones pretending to be federal agents." A crash from the back of the garage cut their conversation short. One of Victor's men had broken in through a window. Ray spun, shotgun raised, but the intruder was faster, tackling him to the ground. The shotgun discharged into the ceiling, wood splinters raining down. Elena didn't hesitate. She fired twice, hitting the man in the shoulder and leg. He went down with a howl of pain, his own weapon skittering across the concrete floor. Ray struggled to his feet, a cut bleeding on his forehead. "There'll be more," he panted. "We need to move." Elena agreed, already gathering her things. "They won't stop." Ray nodded, grabbing a go bag from under his bed, the kind of readiness that spoke of a man prepared for emergency departures. "Got a truck out back, snow-worthy, if we can reach it." The wounded intruder groaned on the floor. Elena approached him cautiously, weapon trained on his chest. "How many more outside?" she demanded. The man spat blood. "Enough to kill you both." Ray moved to a small window at the rear of the garage. Two by the SUV, another circling toward the back. He turned to Elena. "We need a diversion." Elena spotted a row of oxygen and acetylene tanks used for welding. "Those'll work," she said, nodding toward them. Ray understood immediately. Working quickly, he rigged a simple but effective setup, positioning the tanks near the front of the garage and creating a controlled leak. "Won't destroy the place," he explained, "but it'll create enough chaos to cover our exit." They slipped out a side door, the cold hitting Elena like a physical blow. Her wounded shoulders screamed in protest as they crouched behind a stack of old tires. Ray's truck sat 20 yards away, a rugged old Ford with chains on the tires. "On three," Ray whispered, holding a remote starter he'd grabbed on the way out. "1, 2, 3. He pressed the button. A second later, a concussive boom shook the night, followed by a bright flash as the gas ignited inside the garage. Shouts of alarm rose from Victor's men, who rushed toward the explosion. Ray and Elena sprinted for the truck, snow hampering their progress. Elena's wound reopened, warm blood seeping through her bandages. She gritted her teeth against the pain, pushing forward. They reached the truck just as one of the men spotted them. He raised his weapon, but Elena was faster, firing twice. The man dropped, his shot going wide. Ray gunned the engine, the truck fishtailing in the deep snow before gaining traction. They burst through a drift and onto a barely visible service road that wound behind the property. "Hold on," Ray warned as the truck bounced violently over the uneven terrain. "This won't be a smooth ride." Elena braced herself, clutching her purse with the precious drive inside. In the side mirror, she saw flames licking at the windows of Ray's garage, his home and livelihood. Guilt stabbed at her. "I'm sorry about your place," she said. Ray's face was illuminated by the dashboard lights, his expression stoic. "Just things. Can be rebuilt." They drove in tense silence for several miles, the truck's powerful engine and four-wheel drive conquering the snowy terrain. The blizzard worked in their favor now, concealing their tracks almost as quickly as they were made. "We need to ditch this truck soon," Elena said eventually. "They'll be looking for it." "Got a place in mind," Ray replied. "Old logging camp about 10 miles ahead. Might find another vehicle there." Elena nodded, then winced as pain shot through her shoulder. The bandage was soaked through now. "Need to look at that again," Ray observed. "Camp has a first aid station, if it hasn't been ransacked." As they drove, Elena studied Ray's profile. There was more to this reclusive mechanic than met the eye. His reactions had been too quick, too practiced for a simple civilian. "NASA wasn't just a job for you, was it?" she ventured. Ray's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Was a lifetime ago. You were an engineer." A humorless smile crossed his face. "Spacecraft systems, specialized in life support and navigation. Top of my field. Once." "What happened?" Ray was silent for so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "Columbia mission, not the disaster everyone knows about. Earlier one. Test flight, not publicized. 5 crew. New oxygen circulation system I helped design." Elena waited. sensing the weight of his next words. System failed. All five died. They needed someone to blame. I was convenient. But it wasn't your fault, Elena guessed. Ray's laugh was bitter. Warned them about a potential flaw. Documentation proved it. But admitting that would have delayed the program, cost millions. So my concerns vanished from the record, and I became the scapegoat. The truck hit a particularly deep drift, forcing Ray to concentrate on driving for a moment. When he continued, his voice was quieter. Took the settlement they offered. Disappeared. Been fixing engines ever since. Simpler that way. Elena understood all too well the burden of secrets and sacrifices made in the shadows. In her world, loyalty was rewarded with betrayal as often as not. I'm sorry, she said simply. Ray shrugged. Life goes on, or it doesn't. The headlights illuminated a snow-covered sign, Eagles Rest Logging Camp, private property. Ray turned onto an even narrower road, this one barely more than a game trail through the dense forest. Almost there, he said. Then we can... A massive jolt rocked the truck as something rammed them from behind. Elena twisted in her seat to see a black SUV, its grill guard damaged but intact, engine roaring as it prepared for another hit. They found us, she shouted. Ray accelerated, but the snow-covered track offered limited speed. The SUV rammed them again, harder this time. The truck fishtailed, nearly sliding off the road. Hold on, Ray barked, yanking the wheel to the right. The truck plunged into the trees, branches scraping against the windows. Behind them, the SUV attempted to follow, but became wedged between two large pines. Ray navigated through the forest with surprising skill, the truck bouncing over fallen logs and through small clearings. After several tense minutes, they emerged onto another service road, this one leading directly to a cluster of dilapidated wooden buildings, the logging camp. Ray pulled the truck behind the largest structure, cutting the engine. The silence was immediate and heavy, broken only by their ragged breathing and the distant howl of the wind. They'll be on foot soon, Elena said, checking her weapon. Ray nodded grimly. Let's find what we need and move. Fast. They entered the main building through a rear door. Inside, dust covered everything, but the camp hadn't been completely abandoned. Someone had been using it. Perhaps as a hunting base, supplies were stacked in one corner, and a generator sat ready, though not running. Ray found a kerosene lamp and lit it, casting long shadows across the room. First aid kit should be in the office, he said, pointing to a door. Elena followed him, her senses on high alert. The office was small but organized, with a desk, filing cabinet, and a red cross painted on one wall. Ray found the kit in a cabinet and set to work changing Elena's bandage. You're losing too much blood, he muttered. Need to cauterize this. Elena nodded, steeling herself. Do it. Ray worked efficiently, using supplies from the kit along with a heated knife blade to seal the wound. Elena bit down on a leather belt, refusing to cry out despite the searing pain. When it was done, she sat back, sweat beading on her forehead. Thank you. Ray repacked the kit. We need transportation. A quick search of the camp revealed a snowmobile in a shed, partially disassembled but potentially operational. Ray assessed it with a mechanic's eye. Could get it running. Need about an hour. Elena checked her watch. We might not have an hour. As if to confirm her words, a faint engine sound reached them. Vehicles approaching. Multiple engines, Ray noted. Not just our friends from before? Elena's heart sank. Victor must have called in reinforcements. They were being hunted by professionals now, in terrain that offered few escape routes. I need to reach Denver, she said urgently. No matter what I'm carrying. She hesitated, then continued. It's a complete roster of Russian intelligence assets embedded in American institutions, government, military, technology sectors, names, locations, assignments, 3 years of deep cover work. Ray's eyes widened slightly. That would explain the reception committee. If this falls into the wrong hands, dozens of American agents will be exposed and killed. and our national security will be compromised at the highest levels. Ray was quiet for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what she'd said. Then he nodded decisively. All right, change of plans. We don't run, we hide. He moved to a section of floorboards and pried one up, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath the building. Old logging camps like this were used by rum runners during Prohibition, he explained. Hidden compartments for contraband? Elena looked doubtful. They'll search everything. Not if they don't think we're here. Ray moved quickly around the room, gathering supplies. I'll lead them away. You stay hidden. That's suicide, Elena protested. Not planning to die today, Ray said with grim determination. Just need to buy you time. Before Elena could argue further, headlights swept across the windows. Vehicles were pulling into the camp. Decision time, Ray said quietly. Elena weighed her options rapidly. The intelligence she carried was more important than either of their lives. If she was captured, the entire operation would be compromised. How will I find you again? She asked. Ray scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to her. Coordinates. Old fire watchtower, about 5 miles northeast. If I'm not there by dawn, keep moving toward Denver. Elena nodded, tucking the paper into her boot. Be careful. Always am. Ray helped her into the crawl space, then replaced the floorboard. Stay silent, no matter what you hear. In the cramped, dusty space beneath the floor, Elena listened as Ray's footsteps receded. Moments later, the door crashed open, voices filling the room above. Clear this level, a commanding voice ordered. Check every corner. Heavy boots moved across the floor, inches above Elena's head. She held her breath, the encrypted drive clutched tightly in her hand. Sir, tracks leading away from the north side. Another voice reported. Fresh, single set. Follow them. Michaels, Johnson, stay here and keep searching. Most of the footsteps departed, but 2 sets remained. Moving methodically through the building, Elena lay perfectly still, controlling her breathing as she'd been trained. A board creaked directly above her. Nothing here, one of the men said. Place is dead. Check under the furniture, behind the cabinets. What about the floor? Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Solid concrete foundation according to the blueprint. No basement or crawl space. She nearly gasped in surprise. Ray had known somehow he'd known the blueprints would show a different construction than reality. The search continued for what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, the men departed, engines starting up outside as they followed the trail Ray had left. Elena waited another 30 minutes before cautiously pushing up on the floorboard. The building was empty, silent except for the wind rattling the windows. She climbed out, stretching her stiff limbs, mindful of her injured shoulder. Outside, the storm had intensified, snow falling so thickly she could barely see 10 feet ahead. This would work to her advantage, concealing her tracks quickly. She gathered what supplies she could carry: food, water, a flashlight, extra ammunition for her revolver, and slipped out the back door. The night was a white void, disorienting and frigid. Elena pulled a compass from her emergency kit and oriented herself northeast, toward the fire watchtower Ray had mentioned. Each step was an effort, the snow reaching mid-thigh in places. Her shoulder throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, but the cauterization had held. An hour into her trek, a distant sound caught her attention: engines, but not the ground vehicles from before. Helicopters. Victor was bringing in air support. Despite the blizzard, only the most skilled pilots would attempt to fly in these conditions, which meant the best mercenary money could buy. Elena increased her pace, using the dense tree cover to shield herself from aerial observation. The coordinates led her deeper into the wilderness, up a gradually steepening incline. By her estimation, she'd covered nearly 3 miles when a figure loomed suddenly from the swirling snow. She raised her weapon instinctively, but lowered it when she recognized Ray. His face was red from cold and exertion, a fresh cut bleeding on his cheek. Led them on a wild chase, he panted, Lost them in a ravine, but they'll regroup soon. Helicopters, Elena informed him. Ray nodded grimly. Heard them. We need to reach the watchtower before dawn. Better visibility there. They pressed on together, the journey becoming more arduous as they climbed. Ray moved with the assurance of someone familiar with the terrain, finding paths that Elena would have missed. You know these mountains well, she observed during a brief rest. Been my backyard for 15 years, Ray replied. Learned every trail and hollow. The sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly, the darkness shifting from black to deep blue. Dawn was approaching. The helicopters had gone silent, but that was more concerning than reassuring. It meant they had landed somewhere, deploying ground teams. Finally, as the first golden rays of sunlight pierced the clouds, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a tall, wooden structure, the fire watchtower. It rose 50 feet above the surrounding forest, offering a commanding view of the valley below. It's not maintained anymore, Ray explained as they approached, but it's solid, and it has what we need. Inside the base of the tower, Ray moved to a metal cabinet secured with a padlock. He produced a key from his pocket and opened it, revealing radio equipment. Ham radio, he said. Old school, but functional. Can reach Denver with this. Elena stared at him in disbelief. You have a secure communication setup in an abandoned firewatch tower. Ray's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Told you NASA wasn't just a job. Some habits die hard. Always have a backup plan. He began adjusting dials, the radio crackling to life. Need your contact's frequency. Elena hesitated only briefly before providing it. Trust had become a necessity rather than a luxury. As Ray worked to establish contact, Elena climbed the stairs to the observation deck. The storm had begun to abate, visibility improving with each passing minute. The view was breathtaking, endless evergreens blanketed in white, mountains rising majestically in the distance. But what caught her attention were the dark shapes moving through the forest below, figures in tactical gear, advancing methodically toward the tower. And beyond them, parked in a clearing, two black helicopters. Ray, she called urgently. We have company. He joined her at the railing, assessing the situation with a quick glance. Got through to your people. Extraction team is scrambling. ETA 40 minutes. We won't last 40 minutes, Elena said, counting at least a dozen armed men approaching from multiple directions. Ray's expression hardened with resolve. Then we make our stand here. They barricaded the tower's entrance, creating choke points at the stairs using furniture and equipment. Ray distributed the weapons he'd brought: his shotgun, the hunting rifle, Elena's revolver, and a 9mm pistol he'd kept concealed. Conserve ammunition, he advised. Make every shot count. Elena positioned herself at a window, rifle ready. Just like old times, she murmured. Though this was far from her usual operation parameters, Ray gave her a sidelong glance. You've done this before. More times than I care to remember. The first attacker reached the tower's base, attempting to force the barricaded door. Ray fired a warning shot through a gap in the planks. That's close enough, he called out. Next one won't miss. A cultured voice responded, the same one that had claimed to be FBI at Ray's garage. Ms. Blackwood, Mr. Donovan, this has gone far enough. You're surrounded, outnumbered, and, forgive me for saying, outgunned. Elena tensed at the use of her surname. They knew who she was. I'm Victor Petrov, the voice continued. Perhaps you've heard of me, Ms. Blackwood. I only want what you took from my employers. Give us the drive, and you both walk away. You know I can't do that. Victor, Elena called back. Can't or won't. Victor's tone hardened. Your loyalty is admirable, but misplaced. The people you work for, they'll sacrifice you without hesitation, just as they did to Mr. Donovan years ago. Ray stiffened beside her. What's he talking about? Victor chuckled, the sound carrying clearly in the crisp morning air. Oh, didn't she tell you your new friend works for the same government that hung you out to dry? Mr. Donovan, the same people who buried your warnings about the Columbia mission and let those astronauts die? Elena saw doubt flicker in Ray's eyes. Don't listen to him, she urged. He's trying to turn us against each other. Am I? Victor challenged. Ask her about Operation Clearwater. Mr. Donovan, ask her who authorized the destruction of evidence that would have exonerated you. Ray's gaze bored into Elena. What's he talking about? Before she could answer, gunfire erupted from below. Bullets splintered the wooden walls, forcing them both to take cover. They're creating a diversion, Elena shouted over the noise. Watch the stairs. Sure enough, footsteps pounded on the steps leading up to their position. Ray met the first attacker with a shotgun blast that sent the man tumbling back down. A second made it further before Elena's shot found its mark. For 10 minutes, they held off the assault, moving from window to window, coordinating their defense with the efficiency of longtime partners rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. But their ammunition was dwindling, and Victor's men kept coming. A bullet grazed Ray's arm, drawing blood. Elena took a hit to her leg, not serious but painful enough to limit her mobility. Extraction team, Ray grunted, reloading his shotgun with his last shells. Elena checked her watch. Still 20 minutes out, minimum. A new sound reached them, the whir of helicopter rotors. One of the black choppers was lifting off, circling toward the tower. They're flanking us from the air, Elena realized with dread. Ray's eyes narrowed as he studied the approaching helicopter. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. What? Elena asked. That's not their helicopter, he said with grim satisfaction. Wrong model. Too small for a troop carrier. As if to confirm his words, the helicopter opened fire not on them, but on Victor's men below. Precision shooting took out several attackers, sending the rest scrambling for cover. Cavalry's arrived early, Ray said, relief evident in his voice. The helicopter circled once more before hovering near the observation deck. The side door slid open, revealing a man in tactical gear who Elena didn't recognize. Agent Blackwood, he shouted over the rotor noise. NSA extraction team, we need to move. Now, Elena hesitated, looking at Ray. He comes too, she insisted. The NSA agent looked uncertain but nodded. Fine, but hurry. Ray gathered what little gear remained as Elena limped toward the helicopter. Just as they prepared to board, a final volley of gunfire erupted from below. Victor himself appeared on the stairs, weapon raised. The drive, he shouted. Give me the drive. Ray didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, tackling Victor with surprising strength for a man his age. They crashed to the floor, grappling for control of the gun. Ray, Elena cried, trying to get a clear shot. Go, Ray shouted back, his voice strained as he fought. Get that intel to Denver. The NSA agent grabbed Elena's arm. We have to leave now, fuel's critical. Not without him, Elena insisted, breaking free and moving toward the struggle. Victor had gained the upper hand, pressing his weapon against Ray's chest. In that split second, Elena made her decision. She fired twice, hitting Victor in the shoulder and side. He howled in pain, his own weapon discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. Ray scrambled away, kicking Victor's gun out of reach. Together, he and Elena stumbled toward the waiting helicopter. This isn't over, Victor gasped, blood seeping through his fingers as he clutched his wounds. You'll never be safe. They climbed aboard the helicopter, which immediately banked away from the tower. Below, the remaining Blackstone operatives regrouped, but they were too late. The chopper gained altitude, leaving the battlefield behind. Inside, a medic immediately attended to their wounds. Elena finally allowed herself to relax fractionally, the precious drive still secure in her possession. Thank you, she said to Ray, who sat opposite her, looking dazed by the sudden turn of events. He nodded, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he asked, what he said back there, about Operation Clearwater. Elena sighed. This was the moment of truth, literally. It was a CIA operation to protect NASA's reputation during a critical funding period. Records were altered. People who asked too many questions were silenced. One way or another, Ray's face hardened. And you knew about this? No, Elena said firmly. It was before my time, but I've seen the files. Victor wasn't lying about that part. Ray absorbed this, his gaze distant. All these years, the people responsible are gone now, Elena added softly. But the system that allowed it to happen, that's what I'm fighting to change. Their conversation was interrupted by the NSA agent. Ma'am, we're being redirected. New extraction point. There's been a security breach at the Denver facility. Elena's blood ran cold. What kind of breach? Unknown. But we're not taking chances with what you're carrying. New destination is a secure facility in Wyoming. We'll refuel en route. As the helicopter sped over the snow-covered wilderness, Elena caught Ray studying her intently. What happens to me now? He asked quietly. I'm a witness, a liability. Elena held his gaze. You saved my life. And helped secure intelligence that will protect countless others. As far as I'm concerned, you're an asset, not a liability. Ray didn't look convinced. Your people might see it differently. Then we'll make them understand, Elena said with determination. There are still good people in the system. Ray, people trying to do the right thing. The helicopter banked sharply, following a river valley between towering mountains. The morning sun glinted off the snow, creating a landscape of dazzling beauty that belied the danger they just escaped. But Elena knew better than to think they were truly safe. Viktor Petrov had survived, and Blackstone's resources were vast. This was merely the eye of the hurricane, a momentary calm before the next storm broke. As if reading her thoughts, Ray leaned forward. They'll keep coming, won't they? Elena nodded grimly. Until we reach the secure facility, yes. Then we'd better stay alert, Ray said, checking the ammunition in the weapon the NSA agent had provided him. Something tells me our adventure is just beginning. Elena couldn't help but smile despite the circumstances. In Ray Donovan, she'd found an unlikely ally, a man whose past mirrored her own present in many ways. A victim of the very system she served, yet still willing to risk everything for what was right. The helicopter flew on, carrying them toward an uncertain destination and the next chapter of their increasingly complicated journey. But for the first time since the chaos began, Elena felt something close to hope. With Ray's help, maybe she could complete her mission and live to tell the tale. What neither of them realized was that the greatest challenge still lay ahead, and it would come from a direction neither of them expected. The helicopter touched down at a remote airstrip in northwestern Wyoming, just as the sun reached its zenith. No buildings were visible except for a small hangar with unmarked doors and a weather-beaten windsock fluttering above it. The vast wilderness stretched in every direction, mountains rising like sentinels against the horizon. Elena and Ray were escorted quickly into the hangar, which proved to be merely a facade. An elevator concealed in the back wall descended smoothly into an underground facility, sterile white corridors humming with activity despite the isolated location. Welcome to Pine Haven, said their escort, a stern-faced woman who had introduced herself only as Agent Collins. One of our more discreet facilities. Ray absorbed his surroundings with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to classified environments. Cold War relic, he asked. Collins gave him an appraising look. Repurposed missile silo. Very few people know it exists. They were led to a medical bay where doctors attended to their injuries properly. Elena's shoulder wound was thoroughly cleaned and sutured, while Ray's various cuts and abrasions were disinfected and bandaged. Both received intravenous fluids to combat dehydration and blood loss. How long do we stay here? Elena asked as a doctor finished wrapping her leg. Until transport to Denver can be arranged securely, Collins replied. Director Williams wants to debrief you personally? Elena tensed at the mention of the CIA deputy director. Williams wasn't known for his gentle handling of field agents, particularly those involved in operations gone sideways. After medical treatment, they were shown to adjacent quarters, spartan but comfortable enough, with beds, showers, and clean clothes laid out for them. Elena gratefully washed away days of grime and blood, changing into the provided agency issue attire. When she emerged, Ray was waiting in the hallway, similarly refreshed though still bearing the haunted look of a man whose life had been upended. "How's the shoulder?" he asked. "Better," Elena replied. "Your head," Ray touched the bandage at his temple. "I've had worse." An awkward silence fell between them. Outside the crucible of immediate danger, they were suddenly strangers again, a CIA operative and a reclusive former engineer, with little in common beyond the trauma they'd just shared. "They've assigned me a debriefing at 1400 hours, Elena said finally. Same, different room. I imagine." Ray's voice carried a hint of resignation. "Suppose they'll want to know every detail before they decide what to do with me." Elena frowned. "You're not a prisoner, Ray." His smile held no humor. "Aren't I? My home is gone, my identity compromised, and I've just helped a CIA agent evade private military contractors on American soil. That tends to complicate one's life." Before Elena could respond, Collins reappeared. "Agent Blackwood, your presence is requested in command. Mr. Donovan, if you'll follow Agent Hayes, he'll take you to your debriefing." They parted with a nod, uncertainty hanging between them like an unspoken question. The command center was a hub of technology and activity screens displaying satellite imagery, communications officers murmuring into headsets, analysts poring over data streams. At the center stood a tall, imposing figure with silver hair and a perpetual frown, Deputy Director Williams. "Blackwood," he acknowledged curtly. "The encryption drive." Elena produced it from her pocket, where she'd kept it on her person despite the doctor's insistence that she change completely. "Intact, sir." Williams took it reverently, as if handling a holy relic. "Do you have any idea what we've gone through to secure this intelligence? 3 agents dead, international incidents barely avoided, and you, leading a private military force on a chase through the mountains. With respect, sir, I didn't choose to be ambushed in Seattle." Williams waved her objection away. "The important thing is you survived and the drive is secure. Our techs are analyzing it now." He fixed her with a penetrating stare. "The old man Donovan, what's his involvement?" Elena chose her words carefully. "A civilian who provided crucial assistance. Without him, I wouldn't be standing here." Williams didn't look convinced. "Former NASA engineer, correct, involved in that Columbia mission scandal?" "Yes, sir, though from what I gathered, the scandal was manufactured to cover up broader negligence." Williams's eyes narrowed. "Be careful. Blackwood, you're straying into matters beyond your clearance." "Sir, Ray Donovan saved my life multiple times. Whatever happened in his past is precisely why I'm concerned," Williams interrupted. "A man with a grudge against government agencies, with knowledge of classified systems, suddenly in the middle of one of our most sensitive operations, that raises flags." Elena bristled. "He could have left me to die, or handed me over to Petrov. He didn't." "Perhaps," Williams conceded, "or perhaps this was an elaborate play to gain access to our intelligence networks. Petrov is resourceful." "That's absurd," Elena protested. "I saw Ray's face when Petrov's men attacked. That wasn't an act." Williams studied her for a long moment. "You've developed an attachment to this man." "I've developed an appreciation for someone who risked everything to help me complete my mission," Elena corrected, maintaining her professional demeanor despite her rising anger. "Well, regardless," Williams said with finality, "Mr. Donovan will remain here until we've verified his story and determined he poses no security risk. Now, I need your full report on the Seattle operation. What went wrong?" Elena spent the next hour detailing the ambush at the Harbor View restaurant, her escape, and the subsequent pursuit. Throughout, Williams interjected with questions about operational security, possible leaks, and Petrov's tactics. Petrov mentioned Operation Clearwater. Elena said as she concluded her report. He used it to try to turn Ray against me. Williams went very still. And what did you tell Donovan about that? The truth, that records were altered to protect NASA during a critical funding period, and that the people responsible are no longer active. I see. Williams's tone was carefully neutral. Well, that's all for now. Agent Blackwood, get some rest. We'll arrange secure transport to Denver once we're certain Petrov has lost our trail. As Elena turned to leave, Williams added, Oh, and Blackwood, I'd maintain some professional distance from Donovan if I were you. For both your sakes. The warning hung in the air, carrying implications Elena didn't care to examine too closely. She found Ray in the facility's small cafeteria, staring thoughtfully at a cup of coffee. He looked up as she approached, offering a tired smile. How was your inquisition? He asked. About as pleasant as expected, Elena replied, taking a seat across from him. Yours. 3 different agents. Same questions, slightly different phrasing. Classic counterintelligence technique. Ray sipped his coffee. They think I might be working with Petrov, Elena sighed. Williams suggested the same thing. Bureaucratic paranoia at its finest. Can't entirely blame them, Ray said reasonably. If I were in their position, I'd be suspicious too. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the events of the past days settling around them like dust after an explosion. What happens now? Ray finally asked. We wait. They'll move us to Denver when they're convinced it's safe. And after Denver? Elena hesitated. It was the question she'd been avoiding. I'll be reassigned, most likely. As for you? Witness protection, Ray suggested, his tone making it clear how he felt about that prospect. Possibly, or they might offer you a consultant position. Your skills are valuable. Ray? He scoffed. My skills are obsolete. 15 years out of the game might as well be a century in your world. Before Elena could argue, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. Agents rushed past the cafeteria entrance, weapons drawn. An alarm began to wail, red emergency lights casting an eerie glow over the sterile environment. Elena and Ray were on their feet instantly, instincts honed by recent danger. What's happening? Ray demanded of a passing agent. Security breach, the man replied tersely. Stay here. Of course, neither had any intention of following that instruction. Elena led the way to the command center, where organized chaos reigned. Williams was barking orders, screens displaying perimeter alerts. Report, he demanded as a technical analyst frantically typed commands. Multiple intrusion points. Sir, the analyst responded. They're bypassing our security protocols like they have the access codes. Elena's blood ran cold. Petrov found us. Williams spun to face her. That's impossible. This facility isn't on any official register. Yet here we are, Ray observed grimly. How long until they breach the interior? The analyst looked up, face pale. Minutes, at most. They're already through the outer defenses. Williams grabbed a secure phone. Initiate Protocol Omega. Burn everything. He turned to Elena. Blackwood, get to the secure server room. Make sure the encryption drive data is transmitted to Langley before wiping the systems. What about evacuation? Elena asked. Working on it, Williams replied tersely. But our priority is securing that intelligence. Elena nodded, turning to Ray. Come with me. They sprinted through corridors already filling with smoke as agents initiated destruction protocols. The server room was 2 levels down, accessible only via a biometric scanner. You won't have clearance, Elena warned as they approached the door. Ray merely smiled, producing a key card he'd apparently lifted from someone during the commotion. Sometimes old school trumps biometrics. The card worked, overriding the security system, a backup measure for emergencies. Inside, banks of servers hummed, processing the intelligence from the encryption drive Elena had delivered. What are we looking for? Ray asked, surveying the technology. Main terminal, Elena replied, moving to a central workstation. Need to verify transmission and then initiate a secure wipe. She worked quickly, fingers flying over the keyboard. A progress bar showed the transmission to Langley at 78% complete. How did they find us? She murmured, more to herself than Ray. Inside information, most likely, he replied, checking the door periodically. Or what? Ray's expression darkened. Or they followed the NSA extraction team. That helicopter pilot, did you recognize him? Elena thought back to their rescue. No, but I wouldn't necessarily know all NSA personnel. Exactly. Ray's tone was grim. What if it wasn't an NSA team at all? The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. You think our extraction was compromised, that those agents were Petrov's men? It would explain how they found this facility so quickly. The transmission reached 100%, a green confirmation message flashing on the screen. Elena initiated the wipe sequence, ensuring no data would remain if the facility fell. We need to warn Williams, she said, heading for the door. But as they stepped into the hallway, gunfire erupted from the level above. The sounds of combat echoed through the concrete structure, shouts, explosions, the distinctive crack of automatic weapons. Too late, Ray said. We need to find another way out. Elena nodded, mentally reviewing the facility's layout from the brief glimpse she'd had during their arrival. Maintenance tunnels. Every missile silo had them. Should connect to a secondary exit. They moved swiftly, avoiding the main corridors where the fighting seemed concentrated. Elena led them to a utility room, where a heavy metal door opened onto a narrow passage lined with pipes and electrical conduits. This way, she whispered, drawing her sidearm, a new one provided by the facility's armory, to replace her lost revolver. They navigated the dimly lit tunnels, the sounds of battle growing more distant. Occasionally, the entire structure would shudder as explosions rocked the upper levels. Williams said they're burning everything, Elena explained. Standard protocol for catastrophic breach, including us. If we don't move faster, Ray noted. After several minutes of tense progress, they reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Which way? Ray asked. Before Elena could answer, a figure stepped from the shadows of the left passage, a man in his 30s, bloodied but determined, an automatic rifle held confidently in his hands. Despite his injuries, he moved with military precision, sweeping his weapon toward them. Freeze, he barked. Hands where I can see them. Elena and Ray complied, raising their hands slowly. Who are you? Elena demanded. Marcus Sullivan, FBI, the man replied, though he kept his weapon trained on them. I'm looking for Agent Elena Blackwood. Elena's surprise must have shown on her face, because Marcus lowered his rifle slightly. That's you, he said, not a question. Good, we need to move. This place is compromised. FBI, Ray asked skeptically. Like the FBI that showed up at my garage. I know about Petrov's men, Marcus said, impatience edging his voice. I'm not with them. I was embedded in Blackstone for 8 months until my cover was blown yesterday. Been trying to reach you since Seattle. Elena studied him carefully. Prove it, Marcus sighed, then recited. Operation Kingfisher, Authorization Lima Tango 79er. Deputy Director Caswell sends his regards. The code was legitimate, a secure authentication protocol between CIA and FBI for joint operations. Elena relaxed slightly, though Ray remained tense beside her. Why are you here? She asked. To extract you, Marcus replied, gesturing toward the right-hand tunnel. We have intelligence that certain elements within your own agency may be compromised. Petrov has sources inside the CIA, high-level ones. Ray gave Elena a pointed look. Like I said, inside information. The facility shuddered again, more violently this time. Dust and small chunks of concrete rained from the ceiling. That's our cue to leave, Marcus urged. This place is coming down, one way or another. They followed him through the right-hand tunnel. which sloped gradually upward. Marcus moved with a slight limp, a makeshift bandage visible beneath his torn pant leg. "You're injured," Elena observed. "Caught some shrapnel when they breached the north entrance," Marcus explained without slowing. "I'll live." The tunnel eventually ended at a service elevator, old but functional. Marcus pressed the call button, and to Elena's surprise, the doors slid open immediately. "Power's still on emergency systems," he explained. "Won't last long." The elevator carried them upward, the car rattling ominously with each floor. When the doors opened, they emerged into a small equipment shed nearly a mile from the main facility entrance. Through the shed's small window, Elena could see black smoke billowing from multiple points around the disguised missile silo. "Transportation?" Ray asked practically. Marcus pointed to a rugged jeep parked behind the shed. "Not much, but it'll get us to the extraction point." As they approached the vehicle, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A series of controlled detonations was systematically destroying the underground facility, ensuring nothing of value would remain for Petrov's forces. "What about the other agents?" Elena asked, thinking of Williams and the staff they'd left behind. Marcus's expression was grim. "Emergency protocols, those who could evacuate, did. The rest." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena had been in this business long enough to understand what happened when a black site was compromised. Still, the weight of it settled heavily on her conscience. They piled into the Jeep, Marcus taking the wheel despite his injury. As they pulled away, the final explosions collapsed the hangar and surrounding structures, erasing Pine Haven from existence in a cloud of debris and flame. "Where are we going?" Ray asked as Marcus navigated the rugged terrain, staying off established roads. "Safe house near Jackson," Marcus replied. "We'll regroup there, then move you both to a secure location." Elena studied their new companion carefully. Something about his story nagged at her, not necessarily wrong, but incomplete. "How did you know I had the encryption drive?" Marcus kept his eyes on the makeshift path ahead. "Briefed by Caswell before I went undercover in Blackstone. Your mission was need to know, but as the embedded agent tracking Petrov, I was cleared." It made sense. Yet Elena couldn't shake her unease. Perhaps it was just the shock of losing the Pine Haven facility so completely, or the growing certainty that they were dealing with a sophisticated mole hunt rather than a simple intelligence operation. They drove in tense silence for nearly an hour, the Wyoming wilderness stretching endlessly around them. Occasionally, Marcus would check a satellite phone, confirming their route in hushed tones. The safe house turned out to be a modest cabin nestled in a stand of pines, miles from the nearest neighbor. It looked ordinary enough, weather-beaten exterior, small porch, smoke curling from the chimney. "Wait, Smoke. Someone's there," Elena said, hand moving to her weapon. Marcus nodded. "Our contact. She's expecting us." He parked the Jeep behind the cabin, concealing it from the narrow access road. As they approached the door, it swung open to reveal an elderly woman, perhaps in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. Despite her age, she stood straight, her eyes sharp and assessing. "You're late," she said in a voice tinged with a faint Russian accent. Marcus smiled tightly. "Had some complications. Martha, this is Agent Blackwood and Ray Donovan. They need shelter." Martha's gaze lingered on Ray, something like recognition flickering in her eyes. "Of course. Come in. Quickly. It's not safe to linger in the open." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well appointed. Comfortable furniture, modern kitchen, and subtle but unmistakable security features that Elena's trained eye immediately identified. Reinforced windows, multiple communication systems disguised as ordinary electronics, weapon caches concealed within innocent-looking furniture. "You have 30 minutes to rest," Martha announced, moving to check the perimeter cameras disguised as decorative birdhouses. "Then we move again. Petrov's men will be regrouping, searching for survivors." "You know Petrov?" Ray asked, his tone carefully neutral. Martha's smile was cold. "Victor and I are old acquaintances from another lifetime." Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. Martha was KGB during the Cold War, Marcus explained quietly. Defected in '86, one of our most valuable assets. Former KGB, Martha corrected sharply. Now just an old woman who helps when asked. She turned to Elena. The bathroom has first aid supplies if you need to tend your wounds. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourselves. While Ray investigated the kitchen and Marcus checked his equipment, Elena took the opportunity to clean up in the bathroom. As she washed her face, she caught sight of a framed photograph on the wall faded with age, showing a much younger Martha in a Soviet military uniform, standing beside a man Elena recognized immediately. Andrei Petrov, Victor's father. The pieces clicked into place with chilling clarity. Martha hadn't just known the Petrovs, she had been intimately connected to them, perhaps even family. When Elena emerged, she found Martha alone in the living room, calmly cleaning a Makarov pistol, an old Soviet service weapon rarely seen these days. You were more than acquaintances with the Petrovs, Elena said quietly. Martha didn't look up from her task. Very observant, Agent Blackwood. Does Marcus know that Victor is my nephew? Yes. Martha finally met Elena's gaze. It's why I was activated for this operation. I know how he thinks, how he moves. Elena processed this revelation, and you're helping us against your own blood. Family ties are complicated, Martha replied, her voice hardening. Victor betrayed everything I stood for, not the Soviet Union, but the principles of loyalty and honor that transcend politics. He sells his skills to oligarchs and criminals. He has become what I despise most, a man without conviction. There was something almost admirable in the old woman's steely resolve. Elena nodded slowly. Thank you for your help, Martha waved away the gratitude. Save your thanks until you're safely delivered to your people. This journey is far from over. Ray and Marcus returned from their respective tasks. Ray carried a tray of sandwiches, while Marcus had changed his bandages and replenished his ammunition. We eat, then move, Martha declared. I have transportation arranged. The satellite phone on the table buzzed, interrupting her. Marcus answered, his expression growing increasingly grave with each moment. Understood, he said finally. We'll adjust accordingly. He ended the call, looking at the group. Change of plans. Petrov's men have set up checkpoints on all major roads within a 100-mile radius. They're using private military contractors posing as Homeland Security. How did they deploy so quickly? Elena wondered. Money buys efficiency, Martha said grimly, and Petrov has unlimited funds from his employers. So what's our alternative? Ray asked. Ever practical. Marcus hesitated, then said, there's an old network of tunnels remnants from Prohibition era, later expanded during the Cold War. They can get us past the checkpoints, but they're dangerous, Martha finished. Unstable in places and known to very few people. You being one of them, Elena guessed. Martha nodded, a hint of pride in her eyes. I helped map them in 1982, part of a contingency plan that never needed activation. She rose, moving to a bookshelf where she removed a leather-bound volume. Inside was not a book, but a hollow compartment containing old, yellowed maps. We are here, she said, pointing to a location in the Teton Range. The nearest tunnel entrance is 6 miles east, concealed in an abandoned mine shaft. It will take us beneath the mountains, emerging approximately 40 miles south beyond Petrov's security cordon. Ray studied the maps with professional interest. These tunnels, they're reinforced. Some sections, Martha confirmed. Others are natural caverns, modified only minimally. It will not be a comfortable journey. Comfort is a luxury we can't afford, Elena pointed out. How soon can we leave after dark? Marcus decided. Less chance of aerial surveillance spotting us? They spent the remaining daylight hours preparing gathering supplies, checking weapons, studying Martha's maps. Elena found herself working alongside Ray, their movements synchronized with the easy coordination of partners who trusted each other implicitly, despite having met only days ago. Strange bedfellows, Ray commented quietly as they packed emergency rations. The best alliances often are, Elena replied with a small smile. You trust them. Ray nodded toward Marcus and Martha, who were deep in conversation across the room. Elena considered the question carefully. Martha, yes, oddly enough. Her hatred for what her nephew has become seems genuine. Marcus, she hesitated. His credentials check out, but something feels off. Glad I'm not the only one who noticed, Ray murmured. Keep your eyes open. Always do. As dust settled over the mountains, they prepared to depart. Martha had changed into practical hiking attire that somehow didn't diminish her dignified bearing. Despite her age, she moved with the confidence and agility of someone decades younger. We travel light and fast, she instructed, shouldering a pack. No lights once we're in the open, and absolute silence. Petrov will have patrols, particularly near the old mining areas. They left the cabin as darkness fell, moving single file through the dense forest. Martha led the way, followed by Elena, then Ray, with Marcus bringing up the rear. The night was clear and cold, stars glittering overhead like distant ice crystals. Their breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they approached the mine entrance, steep, rocky inclines that tested even Elena's physical conditioning. Ray, despite his age, navigated the challenging landscape with surprising stamina. Martha, remarkably, seemed almost energized by the exercise, setting a pace that belied her 70-plus years. KGB training never leaves you, she explained when Elena commented on her endurance. The body remembers what the mind instructs. After nearly 2 hours of grueling progress, they reached a narrow ravine where the skeletal remains of mining equipment stood like monuments to a forgotten era. Martha led them to what appeared to be a cave-in, blocked by fallen rock and timber. The entrance, Elena asked skeptically. Martha smiled, running her hand along the rock face beside the apparent collapse. Appearances, Agent Blackwood, are often engineered. Her fingers found something, a hidden mechanism that triggered a subtle shift in the rockfall, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Soviet engineering, she said with evident satisfaction. Designed to look like natural destruction. One by one, they squeezed through the opening, activating small tactical lights once inside. The tunnel beyond was surprisingly well-constructed reinforced walls, even flooring, high enough to stand upright. This section was built in 1976, Martha explained as they moved forward. Later portions will be more rustic. They walked for what seemed like hours, the tunnel occasionally branching or descending deeper into the earth. Martha navigated with unwavering confidence, consulting her maps only at major junctions. The air grew increasingly stale and damp the further they progressed. How much longer? Marcus asked during a brief rest, checking his injured leg with a grimace. We're perhaps a third of the way, Martha replied. The next section is the most difficult natural caverns with minimal modifications. We'll need to wade through an underground stream. Marcus nodded, though Elena noticed his expression tighten. His injury was clearly bothering him more than he admitted. As they prepared to continue, Ray pulled Elena aside. His wound is worse than he's letting on, he murmured, fever setting in. I'd guess. Elena had noticed it too, the sheen of sweat on Marcus's forehead, despite the cool temperature, the slight tremor in his hands. We'll need to address it at the next rest point. They resumed their journey, the tunnel eventually opening into a vast natural cavern where stalactites hung like stone icicles from the ceiling. A narrow stream cut across their path, the water black and forbidding in the limited light. We cross here, Martha instructed. The water is cold but shallow, knee-deep at most. Keep to the center where the current is weakest. She led the way, stepping carefully into the stream, using a walking stick to test the depth before each step. Elena followed, wincing as the icy water penetrated her boots and soaked her pants. Ray came next, then Marcus, who struggled visibly with his injured leg. Halfway across, Marcus stumbled, nearly falling before Ray caught his arm. I'm fine, Marcus insisted, though his face was pale and drawn. You're not, Ray countered, but we'll get you through this. With Ray's support, Marcus managed to reach the far bank, where he collapsed onto a flat rock, breathing heavily. We need to check that wound, Elena insisted, kneeling beside him. Marcus tried to wave her off, but Martha intervened. She's right. Infection in these conditions could be fatal. Reluctantly, Marcus allowed them to examine his leg. The makeshift bandage was soaked through, not just with water, but with fresh blood and something worse, the telltale yellowish discharge of infection. Shrapnel's still in there, Ray observed grimly. Needs to come out. Marcus shook his head. No time. We need to keep moving. You won't make another mile like this, Martha said firmly. She removed a small metal case from her pack, a compact medical kit far more sophisticated than standard field supplies. Soviet field surgery, she explained, seeing Elena's surprised expression. Another skill that doesn't fade. What followed was a grim, necessary procedure conducted by flashlight in the depths of the cavern. Martha worked with clinical efficiency, removing embedded metal fragments from Marcus's leg while Ray held him steady and Elena monitored their surroundings. Weapon ready. Marcus remained conscious throughout, teeth gritted against the pain, refusing the limited painkillers Martha offered. Save them, he insisted. Might need them more later. When Martha finally finished, applying antibiotics and a fresh dressing, Marcus's color had improved slightly. The fever would take time to break, but at least the immediate danger had been addressed. Rest, Martha instructed. 15 minutes. Then we continue. While Marcus recovered, Elena explored the immediate area of the cavern, her light revealing ancient petroglyphs on some walls, evidence that these passages had been known to humans for thousands of years before the KGB ever mapped them. Ray joined her, studying the primitive artwork with interest. Makes you wonder what they were fleeing, he mused, or seeking. Some things never change, Elena replied. Safety, purpose, a way forward in darkness. Ray smiled faintly. Getting philosophical in your old age. Agent Blackwood? Hardly old, and she countered with a smirk. But near-death experiences tend to inspire reflection. Their banter was interrupted by a distant sound that echoed through the cavern, a metallic clang, followed by voices too faint to distinguish, but unmistakably human. We're not alone, Elena whispered, immediately dousing her light. Ray did the same, both of them moving swiftly back to where Martha was already alerting Marcus. Petrov's men, Martha confirmed. They know about the tunnels. How? Elena demanded. These passages were supposed to be known only to Soviet intelligence. Martha's expression darkened. Victor has his sources, old KGB archives, perhaps, or what? Ray pressed. Or they followed us, Marcus suggested, struggling to his feet. We need to move. Now. They gathered their gear quickly, all lights extinguished except for Martha's, which she kept directed downward to minimize visibility. She led them into a narrower passage that branched from the main cavern, this one barely wide enough for them to pass single file. This route is not on the main maps, she explained in a hushed tone. A contingency escape path known only to the original survey team. The passage twisted and descended, the air growing thicker with moisture. Twice they had to crawl through sections where the ceiling dipped to mere feet above the floor. Marcus struggled visibly, his breathing labored, but he pushed on with grim determination. After what seemed like an eternity of claustrophobic progress, they emerged into another cavern, smaller than the first but with multiple exits, natural tunnels leading in different directions. Martha consulted her maps by the dim light. We are here, she indicated. The southern exit is our goal, but she hesitated, studying the yellowed paper intently. But what? Elena prompted. There's been a collapse, Martha admitted, pointing to a notation in faded Cyrillic. The last survey team marked this section as unstable. That was 40 years ago. Great, Ray muttered. So we either risk a cave-in or go back toward the armed mercenaries. There is a third option, Martha said, tracing a different route on the map. An emergency ventilation shaft. It leads to the surface, emerging in a ravine about 3 miles from our intended exit point. Can everyone make that climb? Elena asked, glancing meaningfully at Marcus. I'll manage, he insisted, though his face was again beaded with sweat despite the cool air. Then it's decided, Martha said, folding the map. The ventilation shaft. They had just started toward the indicated tunnel when a sound froze them in place. Voices, much closer now, and the distinctive beam of tactical flashlights sweeping the cavern they just left. Move! Martha hissed urgently. Quickly and silently. They hurried into the tunnel, no longer able to risk even Martha's dim light. In the pitch darkness, they felt their way forward, hands brushing the rough stone walls for guidance. The voices grew more distant as they progressed, but none of them relaxed their vigilance. The tunnel gradually narrowed and began to slope upward. After several hundred yards, they reached what appeared to be a dead end until Martha directed their attention upward. A vertical shaft rose from the tunnel floor, disappearing into darkness above. The ventilation shaft, she confirmed, approximately 200 feet to the surface. Elena studied the rusty metal rungs embedded in the rock wall. Those look like they've seen better days. Soviet engineering, Martha replied with the faintest hint of pride. Built to last. Let's hope so, Ray murmured. Martha went first, testing each rung before putting her full weight on it. Despite her age, she climbed with confidence and agility. Elena followed, then Marcus, with Ray bringing up the rear. The shaft seemed endless, each rung a small victory against gravity and exhaustion. Halfway up, one of the rungs broke loose under Marcus's weight, sending him swinging precariously before he managed to grab another handhold. Easy, Ray called softly from below. One step at a time. Marcus nodded grimly, continuing his painful ascent. At last, Martha reached the top, where a heavy metal grate blocked the exit. She braced herself on the highest rungs and pushed upward. For a heart-stopping moment, the grate didn't budge then. With a protesting groan of rusted metal, it lifted and slid aside. Fresh air rushed into the shaft, so sweet after the stale confines of the tunnels that Elena nearly wept with relief. One by one, and they emerged onto the surface, finding themselves in a narrow ravine bathed in pre-dawn light. The stars were fading as the eastern sky brightened with the promise of sunrise. We made it, Marcus breathed, collapsing onto the rocky ground. Not quite yet, Martha cautioned. We're still within the search perimeter. We need to reach the extraction point, a ranger station 3 miles south. There's a radio there. According to my information, they allowed themselves 5 minutes to rest and reorient, drinking from their limited water supplies and checking their weapons. Marcus's condition had deteriorated during the climb, his face ashen, his wounded leg barely supporting his weight. I'll help him, Ray volunteered, moving to Marcus's side. Together, they set off through the ravine, staying close to the rock walls for cover. The terrain was rough but manageable, especially compared to the underground journey they just completed. Birds began to sing in the trees above the ravine, a surreal counterpoint to their desperate flight. They had covered perhaps a mile when Martha suddenly raised her hand, signaling a halt. She stood perfectly still, head tilted as though listening. What is it? Elena whispered. Helicopter, Martha replied softly. Coming this way. Now they all heard it, the rhythmic thump of rotor blades, growing louder by the second. They pressed themselves against the ravine wall, seeking whatever meager shelter the rock formations provided. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, a sleek black shape against the lightening sky. It hovered briefly, then continued along the ravine, sweeping back and forth in a search pattern. They know we're here, Marcus said, his voice tight with pain and frustration. They must have found the tunnel exit. We need to move faster, Martha urged. The ranger station has a radio bunker, Cold War era, hardened against surveillance. If we can reach it, we can call for extraction. They increased their pace as much as Marcus's condition allowed, Ray half carrying him over the rougher sections. The helicopter made another pass, closer this time, its downdraft stirring dust and loose vegetation. They're using thermal imaging, Elena realized. They'll find us soon, Martha nodded grimly. Then we split up. I'll create a diversion. Lead them away. You three continue to the ranger station. That's suicide, Ray objected. Perhaps, Martha acknowledged with a small, fierce smile. But I've lived a long life, Mr. Donovan, and I have old scores to settle with the Petrov family. Before they could argue further, Martha removed a small device from her pocket, a compact signal flare. Half a mile east, she instructed, pressing it into Elena's hand. Look for a green metal roof. The bunker entrance is beneath the main building, behind a false wall in the storage room. The radio frequency is encoded in this. She handed Elena a worn leather bookmark with numbers stamped into it. Martha, Elena began. The old woman cut her off with a swift, fierce embrace. No time for goodbyes. Go now. Make this worth it. With surprising speed, Martha darted away, moving along the ravine wall before scaling a rocky outcrop with the agility of someone half her age. They watched as she disappeared over the ridge, heading deliberately away from their intended route. Minutes later, the helicopter veered sharply, following her trail. Gunfire echoed across the canyon, Martha returning fire, based on the distinctive crack of her Makarov. We need to move, Elena said reluctantly. She's buying us time. Ray nodded, grief and respect mingling in his expression as he adjusted his grip on Marcus. They continued south, the sounds of the helicopter and gunfire growing more distant behind them. The sun had fully risen by the time they spotted the ranger station, a small, weathered building with the promised green metal roof, nestled in a clearing surrounded by pines. It appeared deserted, the windows dark, no vehicles in sight. Careful, Elena cautioned as they approached. Could be a trap. They circled the building once, checking for signs of occupation or surveillance. Finding none, they entered through a side door, weapons ready. The interior was dusty but undisturbed, a simple station with basic amenities, clearly used seasonally rather than year-round. They found the storage room where Martha had indicated, and behind a false panel in the wall, the promised bunker entrance. The bunker itself was a testament to Cold War paranoia: reinforced concrete walls, independent power supply, and a radio system that looked dated but well-maintained. Can you operate this? Elena asked Ray, gesturing to the radio. Been a while, but the principles don't change, he replied, examining the equipment. Need the frequency. Elena produced Martha's bookmark, the numbers clearly visible now in the bunker's harsh lighting. As Ray worked to establish contact, she helped Marcus onto a cot in the corner. His condition had worsened significantly during their final trek, the fever raging, his wounded legs swollen and discolored. Hang in there, she encouraged, administering the last of their antibiotics. Help is coming, Marcus managed a weak smile. Not sure I'll make it that long. He gripped her wrist suddenly, his eyes fever-bright but lucid. There's something you need to know. About Petrov. About the drive. Before he could continue, Ray's voice cut through the bunker. I've got someone, agency frequency, emergency extraction protocol initiated. Elena squeezed Marcus's hand. Tell me later. Rest now. She joined Ray at the radio console, where a terse voice was requesting authentication codes. She provided them, along with their location and situation summary. Extraction team ETA, 40 minutes, the voice confirmed. Secure the perimeter and prepare for immediate departure. Ray leaned back, relief evident in his posture. 40 minutes. Think we can hold out that long? The answer came in the form of a distant explosion that shook dust from the bunker ceiling. They exchanged alarmed glances. Martha, Elena said softly. Another explosion followed, closer this time, then the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors approaching. They're coming, Ray said grimly, checking his weapon. And I don't think they're in a negotiating mood. In the end, it wasn't just about state secrets or government conspiracies. It was about the price paid to uncover truth. Lives forever changed, innocence lost to the bitter winds of winter, and the cold reality of what people become when pushed to their limits. The old mechanic who opened his door to a stranger found purpose again in a world he'd abandoned. The agent carrying the weight of nations rediscovered what she was truly fighting for. And in Martha's final sacrifice, even a lifetime of shadows found redemption in one moment of blinding light. Some wounds will heal with time, while others will linger beneath the surface, reminders of battles fought and choices made. The echoes of gunfire fade, replaced by the quiet courage of those left standing, their spirits tested but unbroken. Yet despite everything beneath the scars and sorrow remains hope. Fragile, yes, but unmistakably alive. A quiet belief that even in darkness, a single voice can ignite change, and that every act of courage echoes long after the dust settles. As we watch the shadows lengthen and the snow drift silently across forgotten trails, perhaps we might ask ourselves if faced with the same darkness, would we find within ourselves the strength to light a candle, knowing full well the cost?